Hello, everybody, and welcome to the show today. I'm really glad you could join us. So today we're talking about one of the most important topics that you need to know when it comes to running a business, which is all things leadership. Well, we're going to be talking about a lot of things, but that's going to be one of the main topics we're going to be jumping into. And with us today to help with this is Ron Carucci. Now, Ron is actually an expert on a number of topics, including the journey from startup to scale of a young business, leading massive transformation in more mature organizations, advice on rising through an organization from middle management to executive leadership, and more. Now, Ron led a 10-year longitudinal study on executive transition, to find out exactly why more than 10% of all leaders fail within their first 18 months of being appointed as leaders, and uncover a holistic approach to organizational transformation on the 4 differentiating capabilities that set successful leaders apart. We're going to jump into what those are. So those findings are heightened in his groundbreaking Amazon #1 book, Rising to Power, which is co-authored by Eric Hansen. Now, these findings are also summarized by Ron in the popular HBR article. HBR selected that research as one of 2016's ideas that mattered most, and he recently presented it on their live series. Now, Ron is a 2-time TEDx speaker, and you can listen to his recent TEDx talk on power. Ron is also a co-founder and managing partner at Navalent, working with CEOs and executives pursuing transformational changes for their organizations, their leaders, and their industries. He has a 30-year track record helping some of the world's most influential executives tackle challenges of strategy, organization, and leadership. From startups to Fortune 10s, turnarounds to new markets, and strategies overhauling leadership and culture to redesigning for growth, he has worked in more than 25 countries on 4 continents. In addition to being a regular contributor to HBR and Forbes, he has been featured in Fortune, CEO Magazine, BusinessInsider, MSNBC, Inc., Business Week, Smart Business, and Thought Leaders. Ron, thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, Todd, great. Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to dive into some of the findings of your study and some of the other things that you have relating to this kind of expertise that you have. So let me ask you right from the beginning, how do I get started with making a leadership team exceptional?
Well, I think many small business owners, the business grows up around them, right? So which means the business grows up in their image, and they forget that they've got to let go of that identity and build ownership for the future of the business in other leaders. So you have to start by understanding that your leadership team isn't just because people report to you and you're a boss. They're the most important governing body your organization has. Whether you have 30 employees or 3,000 employees or 300,000 employees, that pinnacle team is the rudder. It sets the direction for the organization. And if you haven't built them to be that team, and they're all very dependent on you for all the decision-making, for all the problem solving, if you're the answer ATM and the benevolent dictator who gets their way because you're the founder, you actually are weakening the organization by making that much of its future reliant on exclusively you. So the first thing a business owner has to do is begin to shed the identity of they are the business, and begin to build an identity apart from themselves into a leadership team that all has equal ownership for the future.
Makes sense. So stop making all the decisions and let the people under you start making their own decisions. Then in that case, how do you do that effectively? How do you kind of transition from being the one that's the one making the decisions, which is kind of like a dictatorship in the beginning, to start bringing people up to be thought leaders so they can start making those decisions for you, but still be making smart decisions that you'd want them to make?
Well, I think part of the challenge is that most business owners, especially in the early days of a small business, are so busy working in the business, they don't step back to take the time to work on the business. And architecting an organization is part of your job. How do you step back? And whenever I ask, especially smaller companies or mid-caps, when I ask them, well, tell me about your strategy, I get all the counterfeits. I get the mission statement, I get the vision statement, I get the purpose statement, I get brand promises, I get product quotas, I get annual operating plans, I get margin, I get the financial plan that they got for their Series A funding. But I don't get a strategy. I don't get the answer to tell me who you are, tell me why you have a right to win, tell me why customers or consumers or clients would choose you over somebody else doing what you do, and why you have a right to win. So leaders, the first thing you have to do before you can decide how to lead the place or who's going to lead it is decide who you are. Is to be very, very clear and articulate about what are the differentiators that set you apart competitively. Where are you investing in capabilities disproportionately that if you put $1 in, $5 comes in the door? And how is your then you can set up your organization. Most executives just start hiring bodies. They just start getting people in the door. They put up a fluffy, useless mission statement or a vision statement, or it sounds like somebody Googled it and doesn't usually have much meaning. And so there's no identity. So the identity starts to dilute the minute you start hiring other leaders. So you feel like you have to retain control of everything. You can't relinquish control and start building governance into your organization until you know what it is people are governing, and that you have an aligned and a shared understanding of what the direction is. If you walk around any leadership team today in most companies and say, hey, what's our strategy? You're going to get 20 different answers. So getting aligned on your identity is the first thing. The second thing is that then what do you do with all the work? So most leaders don't really appreciate the fact that all work is not created equal, right? You have 3 different types of work in your organization happening. One is competitive work. This is about 15% of the activities in your organization that when you put $1 on those, you get $5 back. It's the stuff that makes you special. About another 15 to 20% of your work is what we call competitive enabling. It's the direct support of that. So if service is a major competitive advantage for you, that's what you're attracting customers on. Your service groups, your product response groups are important. Your data analytics people are probably competitive enabling and supporting that. So you know who your customers are and what they need. The rest of the work, about 60% of it, is necessary work. It keeps the lights on, keeps you out of jail, keeps you compliant, but you don't get paid to do it better than anybody else. And that's the work you have to do for maximum efficiency. Organize it for the cheapest way you can do it well. Your competitive work is what you have to do better than anybody else. It's maximum impact. And the problem is all that work gets mushed together in companies and it all gets diluted. So the necessary work is what wins. It gets all the attention, it gets all the urgency, it gets all the priorities, and your competitive work, the work that sets you apart, that drives customers to your door and drives revenue in the door, gets diluted. So you have to figure out who you are, figure out where the work goes, and then you can begin to build a leadership team around that work and figure out who needs to lead and guide what. So often that all just happens in the matter of mayhem for companies, and it's not done thoughtfully or intentionally, and then it just sort of takes on lives of its own. And then you have the scene, you can walk into these companies, you have the classic case of, $100 million company trapped in the body of a $30 million organization, or a $2 billion company trapped in the body of an $800 million organization, like the teenage boy in his dad's suit. They grew, but they didn't scale. And so how does a leader close that gap? Well, they're so busy running around putting out all the fires that gaps are causing that they can't step back and ask themselves, what have I got here and how do I fix it?
This is really interesting, and we spend a lot of time on this. Curtis, we do about 10 million in sales, and it's interesting because I even said this recently as we're going through our company meeting, and we're looking again at our purpose and our mission and our core values, et cetera. And, it makes me think that in the beginning, we had none of that established. But then it also makes me think of how much of that organically became established in the growth of the organization. Like, I go back and I think, I don't know if I could have actually established our core values from the beginning, because our core values were inherently kind of determined by the team that ended up growing within the organization. It was years into it that we looked at the values that as an organization we believed in, and they weren't mine. They were kind of adopted. We kind of adopted our core values as a formal writing of what the actual company adopted itself as we grew. So I think about that, and I don't know if I have a right answer, and maybe you do. I mean, do you really want to start the business with your mission, with your purpose, with your core values? Or is that something that kind of grows with the organization?
You absolutely do not want to start with that. That's not a strategy, right? Mission, vision, and values are typically, the sooner you do it, the more cosmetic they are. So you're absolutely right. You don't want to go anywhere near that stuff, but everybody thinks it's what we need. So we sit around, brainstorm pretty happy words that mean nothing. A strategy is not mission, vision, values. That's not identity. Until you can write down, here are the 4 or 5 things that differentiate us from competitors. This is how we are going to win. If you answer the question, why would people pick you over the 10 other people doing what you do down the street? No one's going to say, well, because we have good values. Because your customers don't care what your values are. Then you have to tell me, well, okay, if that's what differentiates you, what do you have to be good at? What are the things you have to be exceptional at? And you can't have 20, you can have 3 or 4 that are truly going to make that differentiation true in the market. Until you can answer those questions and put your money where your mouth is, you don't have a strategy, because you can't tell me who you're saying no to. If you tell me you're saying yes to anybody that calls for your help, you have no strategy. When you can tell me who you're not, you can then begin to tell me who you are. So I don't, when people come to us and saying, we want to do mission, vision, values, I'm like, yeah, we'll do that in a year. You need to embody those things and earn your right to write them down when you've lived them. But to put a cosmetic poster on the wall, or have something for your website, or something for the mug of a t-shirt, people are going to see right through it. No one's going to believe it. And they're all going to cheer and feel good about writing it and then go back to business as usual. And it's not going to change anybody's behavior. But those are all for internal consumption. They have nothing to do with how you compete in the marketplace. People like to think they do. But the reality is, if you walk into any company and say, tell me how, do you even know the mission statement? Or tell me how the mission statement shapes your behavior every day. Do you think about how you do your job relative to that mission? You're going to find most people saying, I'm not even sure I know what it is, much less do I think about it.
Sure. So really it comes down to knowing your identity, knowing those core things to develop the strategy of really kind of what you stand for and the people you serve and what you're trying to accomplish and the difference you make in the world, and really knowing like your big whys. And then from that point, you know, the other stuff comes down the road as the kind of organization organically develops.
Well, actually, so no, organically developing, that's the way not to do it, right? Because but then you're just bolting on bodies, and you have people coming and lobbying you for more money and saying, I need to hire 10 people, I need to hire 20 people, and you're just bolting on bodies without really thinking about how is that contributing to the strategy. So organizations need to be designed intentionally with purpose and forethought. But most people let it happen organically, and they just let bodies start proliferating, and suddenly we've gone from 50 people to 200 people and 200 people to 1,000 people, and we don't really know how it happened. And suddenly we don't even know what half of them are doing, or if we're spending the right money on the right talent, or if we've invested disproportionately in the things we say we need to be good at. We've just hired people, or the person who screamed the loudest got the most bodies or the biggest budget, or my favorite friend or co-founder got to do what they wanted to do because they had a pet idea. And so organically is the least productive way to grow an organization and scale it. Because you're probably just chasing dollars, right? Whatever somebody called today for to order, that's the strategy. And so you see all this money coming in the door, you think the gears are lubricated, right? And you think the market's rewarding you for doing something well, and it's not. It's luck, it's a moment in time, but it's likely not sustainable if it's not rooted in a well-developed strategy that's provable that there's a need, and a well-designed organization that can execute it and scale with it.
So it's very intentional.
Yeah, very intentional. And most leaders don't do it. They are so busy just chasing the dollars and keeping the lights on and doing their thing and enjoying the ride that they're not seeing that the seams are all cracking in the organization as you add people.
So do you have an example of somebody that kind of figures that out, where you're there, maybe you're a part of it, maybe you were, where you kind of become part of that light switch moment where they go from trying to do things organically without purpose, and then they come in and really get to know who they are, what their purpose is, and then they kind of drive forward with a purpose?
Sure. That's the work we do at Navalent. So we begin all of our engagements with a really deep diagnostic, sort of a real deep MRI on your organization, to understand what story have you told yourself? What story are you living today? And it's a really forensic look at the data that exists and what the people in the organization are saying about it. So we can understand where there's dissonance, where is the story not aligned, where are there disconnects among leaders and groups and departments, so that we can come up with a full picture. I mean, you'd never walk into a heart surgeon and say, yeah, I'm having a really sharp pain right here in my chest. And want the heart surgeon to say, oh yeah, that's a ventricle block. It needs a stent. Let's go put one in. Without saying, well, maybe we should take a look first. So leaders shouldn't start tinkering with their organization without really understanding what's going on under the hood. So once we have a diagnostic and get a real sense for, is the strategy articulated? Is it viable? Have you invested in it? Then we can ask, is the organization built to do what that strategy asks of it? The culture, the people, the processes, the governance, the resources, the technologies. We look at the whole system, not just the org chart. I tell clients all the time, your organization is perfectly designed to get the results you're getting. They may not be the results you want, but whatever results you're getting, you're perfectly built to get them. So we've worked with lots of mid-cap companies. We've done it was a clean energy startup company that was an amalgamation of 4 acquisitions. We came together, and they would their first request was, we just need core processes across all 4 companies. And we said, yeah, no, that's not going to work. So you need to really understand, if you want to build this into one enterprise from these 4 little companies, how will they fit together? You can't just glue them together with duct tape. You have to actually design a scalable enterprise. we've gone into large companies and done the same work. We come back with a set of articulating, okay, these are the 3 or 4 things we're going to bet on. These are the 3 or 4 things we believe customers will come to us for, that we can do better than anybody else, that we can invest in the capabilities to be better at them. And that's what we're going to set sail forth. And then we can design the organization and the systems and the processes and the culture. And then you can articulate your values, right? Then you can articulate, well, these are the behaviors we need to embody this strategy. And off they go. But it takes intentional work and effort to do. It's not just something you can sit in a room together and do up an org chart, or most people do the nip and tuck thing where, oh, you know what, she's struggling. Let's take that team and put it over here onto him. And you walk into these organizations that looks like those people who have had way too much cosmetic surgery. They just have had way too many nips and tucks in them. And you think, oh gosh, you're going to stop, put the scissors down. And these are well-intended leaders. They're smart leaders. They know their business, but they just have never been taught how to build a strategy and how to build an organization. They just had a good idea one day, or hated corporate America and didn't want to work for the man anymore, so went out and started something. And the market rewarded them early on, and they got some money, and they just off they go. And then they hit a ditch and don't know what to do.
So how do you do that? What are some of the first steps that you take to really developing, or the fundamentals of developing a strategy?
So, we have a set of tools we use. Once I have a diagnostic, once I have the MRI to say, okay, you have either 5 articulated strategies that compete with each other, so you don't really have a clarity on who you are, or you don't have any clarity at all. No, there's nobody articulating on who you are. You're just making money on this thing you sell. And we'll talk to customers, and turns out the thing you think you're selling is not what they're buying. The value that's created in their head is a very different proposition of value that you think you're selling. So we need to get those aligned. So based on a diagnostic, we'll begin to say, what proof do we have in the marketplace that there's a demand for what you want? What are the signals? What are the disruptions? What are the trends happening among people you believe are buyers? And how are you? Why would they come to you? What are they telling us they choose you for? And how are you differentiated? And articulating 2 or 3 distinctive, viable differentiators. White glove service, user-friendly UI or UX, integratable technologies, cost, price. Integrated solutions. But this is what we do better than anybody else. And then we'll ask, okay, so if that's what you're going to be known for, what do you have to be good at? What are the capabilities that you have to have in your organization, 2 or 3 or 4, no more, that truly you've got to invest in disproportionately to get good at in order to repeatably and reliably deliver on that differentiation. And it's much harder than it sounds, Ty, to really articulate those things, because everybody wants to articulate 20, right? And to really get choiceful on the trade-offs. So we're not going to be good at that. We're not going to try and invest in that. That's not us. We can't be good at it. And if customers come looking for that, we're the wrong provider for them. We have to say no. And that takes levels of discipline and courage that many leaders, especially in the early days, struggle to find, because they think we can't say no to money. So once we've articulated those differentiators and those capabilities, we can then say, okay, well, where's the work? How do we build out the organization? What are the activities? What are the tasks? What are the technologies? What are the processes? What are the decision rights that have to be distributed? And in what configuration in order to optimize those capabilities? Do we have to, is there engineering and product development? Is there marketing and customer analytics? Is there a whole back office set of efficiencies in HR, legal, finance, all that other stuff that we can maximize to support us in an efficient way, because that's necessary work, but we need it. And begin to configure, where does all the work have to reside? What's the best way to assemble it? And how do we link it all? What's the way it stays connected? Are there processes? Are there technologies? Are there governing groups? Are there roles? Are there metrics that have to link these bodies of work together to synchronize it? And then you can ask, well, who should lead it, right? What set of leaders needs to preside over this body of work in order to make it scale and grow and to work at the way we've designed it? So that's the way we go about it. Most often when we we walk in, there's been an attempt to do a couple of reorgs, or we added new values, or we installed this new technology in everybody's desktops, or everybody got training on something. So we try to put duct tape on something to try and be corrective or to address some symptoms, but it didn't work. It didn't stick. We're right back in the same place we were, 8 months ago. And it's often because of a holistic approach to really looking at the system. It's like you're having a chest pain. I took some Tums. Well, it didn't work. Or I started working out harder to get in shape, even though I'm 80 pounds overweight. So we tried to address the immediate pain without really understanding what the core issues were.
So once you get to that point, you said, you come in and a lot of people are trying to do this with core values and mission and purpose, et cetera. But then what are some of the other big mistakes that you see when people are even at the starting point that you're talking about of developing that strategy, like to change the way they think to get them to do it the right way? What are some of those issues you run into, those blocks?
Well, one of the things, especially in the early days, I hear from a lot of entrepreneurs is we're too small for that strategy stuff for big companies. That we're too small for that. And that's a really big mistake, right? If you can't articulate what swim lane you're going to be in, granted, in the early days of a company, you need some flexibility. You may have an idea that's not viable, but it may morph into an idea that is. So for sure, you have to be flexible, but you can't be all things to all people. And so understanding where there's elasticity in your idea and where there's not, and being willing to put some stakes in the ground early around, this is the strategy you want to pursue. This is the identity we believe we are. And we've done the research, we've done our homework, we have the data to prove there's a demand for this. Not just because somebody called and wanted it, or not just because I have some great idea with a bunch of VC friends with money, but really because I have truly recognized a differentiatable unmet need in a market among a set of consumers or customers or clients that I can meet better than anybody else. I know what the barriers to entry are, so I know how quickly somebody could replicate this or compete with me. If I needed to, I filed patents. I've done the work to protect the space I say I want to own, and I'm disciplined in my pursuit of that growth. I'm saying no to cash just to get money in the door. I'm hiring the right talent. I'm letting go of decision rights, and I'm scaling accordingly. I'm developing talent, so I don't have to do that classic Series B, exit everybody, bring in new people thing that just sets me back a whole year. I'm scaling my talent while I'm scaling my business. So often, entrepreneurs don't do that. They think, oh, they'll grow with me. And suddenly you have your Series B funders and they're going, well, who are these yahoos? They can't lead anything. So you want my check? They got to go. So now you back yourself into it. But they're my friends. They've been loyal to me. They've been here the whole time. I can't, so we buy them jobs. We put them down a level. We layer over them. And then they get pissed off at that. And so they don't quit and leave, they quit and stay. They wait for their equity cash out and they just stick around till, they get their paycheck. So those early days of forming an enterprise are so rife with uncertainty that leaders just sort of ride the wave. Then the other flip side is that when they get bored, right? Some of the entrepreneurs get to the place where I've stabilized something that's scaling, it's fundable, it's profitable. And I'm like, yeah, I'm bored. They don't know, then you have to go. You have to get somebody in there who can do this and say goodbye. And they think, no, I got this, I can do it. And they don't realize that they're stifling everybody else's desire and ideas and passion to see what's possible because they've outgrown it and it's outgrown them, but no one's being honest about that. So founderism has really set in and clouded the judgment of people.
Once you come in and you get some of these fundamentals down and you develop the strategy, how do you get people on board with that? Because you're talking about even large organizations you're coming into. Sounds like it could be a fundamental shift on how they do business. So how do they kind of get buy-in from the whole team to get everybody the behind the new strategic vision?
Yeah, that's a great question, Ty. The change management aspects are huge. And people often think that you start managing change when you start implementing something. Change management for us starts the minute we start collecting data. Once at the earliest parts of the MRI, people are already assuming change is coming. So you have to start preparing the seeds, building commitment, building understanding from the very beginning. When we design the strategy, and more importantly, when we design the organization, we don't do it. we build a design team of a good swath of people from the organization. So the future of the kingdom is built by the people who have to live in it and embody it, right? So they become the best evangelists to sell it because it was built by and for us.
Sure,
We
and they take
give the
ownership.
tools, we facilitate the process, we help guide the choice making and the trade-offs. Sometimes hold up a harsh mirror around the considerations they're making, but it's their organization to build. So we teach them how to do it and do it with them, but it's theirs, so that when they unveil it, they can say, hey, we did this, we believe in it, here's why. And it's much easier to get people to adopt it. And then, of course, when you implement it, you have to help people get on board. You can't just say, here's your new job, good luck. You know, and there are always some people that don't make the trip. There are some people for whom there are not slots, or they're unskilled, or they can't make the trip, or they don't want to, and they opt out. That's always a part of a journey, but you can minimize that by making sure you provided every pathway possible for people to join the story. When you unveil that new world, you've got to give people the chance to locate themselves in the story. There's a myth that people fear change. They don't. People fear change that excludes them. And so if they can't see how they fit in the bigger story, and you can't help them see how they fit in the story, even if it's going to take some work, they're going to resist. But if you help them and not just cheer them on, or sell them, but truly accompany them on their own cultivation development, they'll get on board and they'll commit, and they'll help you make it successful.
That's really interesting. What about the second part of that? I mean, once you develop the strategy and you define it as where your work goes, then what happens at that point? Because I imagine that's a whole restructure in a lot of cases of maybe positions not being needed or positions being adopted. So how do you segue into that next stage of determining what the work that's involved and where that work goes?
So that's the work of design. So you have to actually design the organization. And when we're done with the design body of work, it's like a 90-page blueprint of here's how this new thing works, right? And then the implementation process is, okay, how do we built a new house on the same land the old house was on, right? So now we have this new beautiful house sitting next to this old house. How do we move in? And sometimes, like any new house, some of the rooms don't have the wallpaper yet, or some of the carpeting isn't laid yet, or the kitchen doesn't have the hardware on it yet, but the rooms are there. We designed the house to build this strategy. So you have to start, implementation is helping people move into that house and accompany them. It's months and months of work. It's not like most leaders announce a new organization. They don't implement it. And they don't do the work to actually truly help people embody new roles. So you get this terrible hybrid thing of a little bit of a new and a little bit of the old mushed together, and then you never really leave the old behind. And so you get regression back to old behavior. You really have to make sure that your process of building the house, designing architecting it with every detail of decision rights and roles and groups and charters and teams and all the stuff that goes into understanding how does this new thing work and how does it meet the needs of a strategy. And then how are we do a whole risk and readiness assessment. How ready is your organization for this change? What are the risks to implementing it to your business? What do we have to do to get people more ready? We actually do all the analysis to help people, move into that house as smoothly as possible and as undisruptively as possible, and to make sure it does what you built it to do.
Well, that's another great point. I mean, you talk about analysis. What kind of KPIs, what kind of measurables are you having to make sure that the strategy is successful? And are you testing it first? I mean, you develop this whole new strategy. What kind of testing do you do before, coming in and deciding where the work goes and restructuring everything to support that strategy?
So when we have a design in place, we do what we call scenario planning. So, a lot of people do the racy thing, or, some silly heuristic that tries to figure out, does this thing work? They don't work. We actually build scenarios. We even build simulations to put people in to see, does this thing do what it's supposed to do? So we'll write 30 or 40, XYZ premium customer calls, the new product gets shipped to this thing, but this goes wrong, what happens? And you have to answer the scenario in the new design. And we create 30 or 40 of those, one, to test the new design, and two, it's how we teach people the new design. We'll sometimes even build mini simulations out of those scenarios and actually have people enact them to see, can they live in this new world? Do they have the leadership muscles? Do they have the collaboration muscles? Do they have the strategic muscles to be able to embody? And where are they missing it? So that we know when we actually go to implement it, we're going to need to backfill some gaps there to prepare them. So we make sure that they are ready for this. We put in transition metrics. So we measure, by the first quarter, all governing bodies are up and running. By the second quarter, by data measurement, people are telling us they understand their roles. They understand who they coordinate with. They understand how their team works. The information flow for certain things is doing what it's supposed to do. So we actually ask the organization, are the things we said were supposed to be happening actually happening? If not, where are we falling short? So if the things going into heart failure, we know early and we can correct.
Where are some other areas that you see leaders fail trying to develop the strategy and then actually get this off the ground?
They make a lot of times leaders make wild assumptions about what they know. Their own arrogance gets in their way, and they assume I know what customers want, without any data to support it. The flip side of that is they become cowardices. They become so afraid to take a risk, and they get paralyzed in too much data and too much analysis, and aren't able to move. So their own risk aversion, or they're afraid to say no. So many leaders, one of the biggest findings in our study was that the greatest abuse of power was not for self-interest, but it was the abandonment of power. People too afraid to use the power that comes with their role. They want to please people. They want to be Santa Claus. They want to be benevolent, and popular. They want to buy people's loyalty by giving them what they want and saying yes too many times. And so they dilute the organization's capacity. They dilute focus, and they're just so afraid to say no. One of the greatest gifts a leader can give their people is to say no, even to great ideas, and to keep them focused on the things where you've set them out to be successful. And leadership is the ability to disappoint people at a rate they can absorb. And if you don't want to disappoint people, you shouldn't be leading, because it's your job. And if you have a need to be liked, if you're not fond of conflict and differences, if people are not routinely in your office weekly telling you things that are uncomfortable for you to hear, you can confidently assume your leadership sucks, because they're either afraid to tell you or they think there's no point in telling you. And if you're interpreting no news as good news, you're a dangerous person, because that's just how organizations work. There are always things to talk about. There are always difficult things to hear. There are always dissenting points of view. And if you're not soliciting those and making it safe to get them, and not always acting upon them, but at least hearing them, and in some cases acting upon them, you're not building a culture where everybody owns the performance of the organization. You're just teaching people that you're going to be the nice guy, the good guy. You're the answer ATM. I can solve any problem, and making them very dependent on you, and proving your own indispensability, right? Which is just feeding your own ego. And so if you haven't done all that work to prepare yourself for those moments, and building in the health of a culture where people are in your face telling you things that you probably are uncomfortable to hear, then you should be worried, because rest assured they are talking about them with someone. People are telling stories about you at their dinner tables at night. If you don't know what stories they're telling, you should be worried.
So many things we covered, Ron, today about really creating a business with purpose and being able to develop your strategy, and then, deciding where your work goes and get that off the ground to implement the strategy, and a lot of mistakes that are made by organizations and leaders throughout this process. What haven't I asked that I should ask that you think everybody really needs to know to get their foot started, or to get started down the right path to get this
I
done?
think, if you sit at home or sit in your office as a leader and wonder about how are things going, the first question you should ask is, why don't you know? Or if you think you know, on what do you base what you know? And if you've never had a 360, if you've never gotten feedback from people, if you've never asked people, how do you experience my leadership? Start by getting a good assessment of you, because sometimes the gap between our intentions and our impact is so much wider than we want to believe. And if you aren't certain, or if you're only certain because you think you're certain, go out and test. Are the things that I intend to be happening here, the things that I intend for people to experience about my leadership, actually what's happening? And get a thorough, professional, comprehensive look at you as a leader. And there'll be some of it that's hard to hear, but you should want to know. You should want to know where you can be better. where you're falling short, where people are interpreting you in ways you don't want to be interpreted. One of the hardest parts we found in our study is that leaders don't realize that when you're in a bigger job or at the top, your life's on a jumbotron. You are a 24/7 newsreel. You have a bullhorn strapped to your mouth 24/7. Everything you say is amplified and everything you say is misinterpreted. We had one executive walk down the hall really, really fast, and the whole room thought there was a crisis. He had to go to the bathroom. So if you don't know what narratives you are spinning in your organization, if you don't know what tales your behavior is triggering, you have to know that stuff. And you should have a regular mechanism by which you learn it, and so that you can calibrate and close the gap between your intentions and your impact. So if you don't have that in place, get it yesterday.
Ron, very good. There's so many things I'd love to cover. We really got into a lot of things relating to leadership and other things you should be doing. So where can everybody go to learn more and get more information?
Yeah, come visit us. We love to keep chatting. You can find us at Navalent, NAVALENT.com. We got a great treasure trove of online courses in leadership and how to be strategic, and there's a whole course on there on how to create a strategy, just what we talked about. We've got great videos. We've got a great ebook on leading transformation. So if you want our playbook on how we do transformational work, come and download that ebook called Leading Transformation. It's at navalent.com/transformation. We've got videos. We've got white papers. We've got a years of blogs, and we have a quarterly magazine called the Navalent Quarterly, which you can download all the past editions of, that has all kinds of stuff about teams and self-awareness and self-development and leadership and conflict and all kinds of stuff. So you can come and dive into a free treasure trove of great content to help you get better and help your team get better.
Ron, thank you so much for joining me today. This has been really exciting.
Ty, great to be with you. Thanks so much.
So everybody kind of got the basics of a blueprint here, roadmap of exactly what you really need to do to make your organization successful. As Ron said, so many companies that you might be envious of that you look at that are producing really high revenues get to a point where they stall out and have real problems because they didn't do the things that Ron talked about. They didn't develop the strategy and then develop the plan to execute the strategy. There's so many tools, there's so many resources, there's so much information at navalent.com. So that is your next step. Make sure you go to navalent.com. That's NAVALENT. Go to navalent.com and check out many of the resources that are there, the worksheets. And I think actually Ron had even just mentioned that there's a whole course to help you develop the strategy. So you can get it all at navalent.com. Make sure you make that your action step, because again, if you're building a house on a really rocky foundation, then things don't look good. Okay, so you might as well get it started right from the beginning the right way, with actually knowing where your organization's heading, with having your strategy developed, and then building the organization around that strategy. Don't know how to do it? Make sure you go to navalent.com, NAVALENT. So visit navalent.com to get started, and make sure while you're there, you check out all the resources that Ron has, including this course to develop your strategy. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.